My daughter-in-law tried to replace me, but I let karma teach her better than I could. I never thought I'd live to see the day when the home I built with my own two hands would feel like foreign ground beneath my feet. When the laughter that once filled these walls would echo without me. When the family I poured my soul into would gather around a table I wasn't invited to sit at. But that day came, my dear. It came quietly, like winter's first frost, beautiful on the surface, but deadly to everything it touches. She didn't remove me with force. No, she was far more clever than that. She erased me slowly, deliberately, replacing every memory of me with a prettier, more convenient version of motherhood. And for a while I let her. Because sometimes, the greatest lessons aren't taught by our words, they're taught by our silence and life's perfect timing. Welcome, my dear ones, this is Grandma Alice Stories, where every tale carries a lesson and every wound carries wisdom. Pull up your chair, pour yourself something warm, and settle in close. What I'm about to share isn't just my story, it's a reminder that foundations can't be replaced, only forgotten. And when they're forgotten, well, that's when everything begins to crumble. Listen carefully now, because life has its own way of teaching what we're too proud to learn. 32 years. That's how long I lived in that house on Maple Street. Every corner held a memory, my husband's laughter in the kitchen, my son's first steps in the hallway, birthday candles blown out in the dining room, tears dried on the front porch. I planted the rose bushes out front when Tommy was just a baby. Now they stood taller than the fence, blooming every spring like clockwork, faithful as the sunrise. I wasn't a wealthy woman. Never had been. But what I lacked in money, I made up for in love. Every Sunday, my table was full. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans from my garden, and apple pie, made from my mother's recipe, passed down through 3 generations. My son Tommy would bring his friends, his girlfriends, and eventually his wife. That table was sacred ground. It was where we celebrated victories and mourned losses. Where we laughed until our sides ached and prayed until our spirits were full. When Tommy first brought Claire home, I saw the way she looked around my small living room. Her eyes swept over the worn furniture, the outdated wallpaper, the family photos in mismatched frames. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Still, I welcomed her. I hugged her tight, offered her the best seat, served her the biggest slice of pie. I wanted her to feel what I felt, that love doesn't live in fancy things. It lives in tradition, in presence, in the worn patches of a sofa that held 3 generations of conversations. "Your home is so cozy, Mrs. Patterson," she said that first evening, her voice sweet as sugar and just as artificial. Tommy beamed at her, oblivious. "Mom's the best cook in the state, aren't you, Ma?" I squeezed his hand. "I just cook with love, sweetheart. That's the only secret ingredient that matters." Claire smiled again, but something flickered behind her eyes. I didn't recognize it then. Now, looking back, I know exactly what it was. Competition. She saw me not as a mother-in-law, but as an obstacle. A relic of old ways that didn't fit into the modern, Pinterest-perfect life she was designing. They married in the spring. I wore my best dress, the navy blue one I'd worn to my sister's wedding years before. I cried happy tears as I watched my boy promise forever to this woman. I prayed she'd love him the way he deserved. I prayed she'd understand that family isn't built overnight. It's cultivated, nurtured, protected like those rose bushes in my yard. For the first year, things seemed fine. Sunday dinners continued. Claire would bring store-bought desserts, politely declining to help in the kitchen. "I'm not much of a cook," she'd say with a laugh, tapping her manicured nails on the table. Tommy would jump to her defense. "She's busy with work, Ma. She's got that big promotion coming up." I didn't mind. Not everyone was raised in a kitchen like I was. But slowly things began to change. First, it was the Sunday dinners. "We're just so tired this week, Mom," Tommy would say over the phone. "Maybe next Sunday?" Next Sunday became the Sunday after. Then it became once a month. Then holidays only. Then came the babies. 2 beautiful grandbabies, Lily and Jack. I held them in the hospital, breathed in that sweet newborn smell, and thanked God for the privilege. I knitted blankets, bought storybooks, and offered to babysit whenever they needed. For a while, Claire accepted. I'd watch those babies in my living room, singing them the same lullabies I'd sung to Tommy, feeding them mashed bananas in the same high chair he'd used. But Claire started making comments. Little ones at first. You know, Grandma, we're trying to avoid sugar with Lily. Modern pediatricians say it's not good for development. Actually, we're using a different sleep method now. It's based on new research. I appreciate your stories, but we're trying to keep screen time and stimulation to a minimum. Maybe save the old photo albums for when they're older. Old photo albums. As if our history was clutter. As if the life I'd built was something to be minimized. Tommy started siding with her. She's the mama. We've got to respect her wishes. And I did. I bit my tongue and adjusted. I stopped baking cookies with sugar. I stopped singing loudly. I stopped sharing stories of Tommy's childhood, afraid they'd be labeled overstimulation. I made myself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the narrow space Claire was designing for me. Then came the birthday party. Jack's 3rd birthday. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. I bought him a wooden train set, the kind that lasts forever, the kind Tommy had played with as a boy. I planned to make his favorite cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting. I called Tommy 2 weeks before to confirm the date and time. Oh, Mom. His voice trailed off. Claire's handling all the planning this year. Let me have her call you back. She never called. I tried again a week later. No answer. I left a voicemail. Hi, sweetheart, just checking in about Jack's party. I want to make sure I have the right date. Love you both. Silence. 3 days before the party, I drove by their house. I saw Claire unloading decorations from her car. Balloons, streamers, a banner that read, Happy Birthday, Jack. My heart lifted. I pulled into the driveway. Claire. Oh good, I caught you. I wanted to confirm what time on Saturday. Actually, Alice, she interrupted, not meeting my eyes, we're keeping it small this year. Just immediate family. You understand. I blinked. I am an immediate family. I mean like parents and siblings. It's going to be really intimate. We don't want Jack overwhelmed. My chest tightened. I'm his grandmother. I know, and we'll celebrate with you another time. Maybe you can take him for ice cream next week? She turned and walked into the house, arms full of decorations for a party I wasn't invited to. The door closed softly, but it might as well have slammed. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, unable to move. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was stunned. Hello. How does a grandmother become not immediate family? How do 30 years of love get reduced to a future ice cream date? I drove home in silence. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every comment, every gradual dismissal. And then, on Saturday morning, I made a mistake. I opened Facebook. There was the party. Posted in real time. Jack is surrounded by balloons and presents. Tommy smiling beside him. And there, in my chair, the chair I'd sat in at every family gathering for 3 decades, was Claire's mother, cutting the cake, holding my grandson, wearing the grandmother necklace Claire had given her that read, Nana's boy. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the photos. Claire's mother, front and center in every shot. Claire's family filling my spot, playing my role, living my life. And not a single mention of me. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, the house deathly quiet except for the tick of the old clock on the wall. The same clock that had witnessed every Sunday dinner, every scraped knee, every whispered prayer. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, staring at the empty chairs around my table, wondering when I'd become so easy to erase. My phone buzzed. A text from Tommy. Asterisk, had a great party today. Jack loved it. Talk soon, Mum. Just no apology. No explanation. Just talk soon. I set the phone down and looked out the window at my rose bushes, barely visible in the darkness. They'd survived storms, droughts, and harsh winters. They always came back. Because their roots went deep. And as I sat there in the silence, something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not bitterness. Something quieter. Stronger. If she wants to replace me, I thought, then let her try. Because I knew something she didn't. Something life would soon teach her in ways I never could. You can't replace a foundation. You can only forget it's there. And when you do, that's when everything begins to fall. The weeks following Jack's birthday party passed like a slow bleeding wound, painful, but not quite enough to make you scream. Just enough to remind you, with every breath, that something vital had been damaged. I stopped calling as much. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. Every unanswered call felt like another brick in the wall Claire was building between me and my family. Every brief, distracted conversation with Tommy felt like talking to a stranger wearing my son's voice. So I pulled back. Not dramatically, I didn't make announcements or send hurt-filled messages. I simply stepped aside. And life, as it always does, continued without me. I learned about my family's life the way distant relatives do, through social media. Claire posted everything. Everything, professional photos of the children in matching outfits. Elaborate holiday decorations. Date nights with Tommy at expensive restaurants I knew they couldn't quite afford. And always, her mother was there. Nana's here for the week. The kids are so blessed to have her. Sunday brunch with Nana. She makes the best pancakes. Nana surprised us with a trip to the zoo. Making memories. Each post was a knife, carefully placed. Because Claire knew I'd see them. She wanted me to see them. This wasn't just about replacing me, it was about erasing me so completely that even the memory of my presence would fade like old photographs left too long in the sun. Her mother, Patricia, was everything I wasn't. Wealthy, polished, always dressed like she was heading to brunch at a country club. She didn't bake from scratch or tell old stories. She bought expensive gifts and took them on trips and posted about it endlessly. She was new, exciting, Instagram-worthy. I was old wallpaper, faded, outdated, something you'd eventually cover up during renovations. 3 months after the birthday party, Tommy finally called. Not texted, actually called. My heart jumped when I saw his name on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, ma. Sorry I haven't called much. Work's been crazy." Always work. Never, "Claire told me not to," or "I've been avoiding you because it's easier than confronting my wife." Just work. "I understand, baby. How are my grandbabies?" "They're great. Growing like weeds. Actually, that's kind of why I'm calling." He paused, and I could hear the careful rehearsal in his silence. "Claire's mom is going to be staying with us for a while. She's helping out with the kids, and with Claire's new promotion, we really need the extra hands." My grip tightened on the phone. "For how long?" "We're not sure yet. Could be a few months. Maybe longer." Maybe longer. The words settled in my stomach like stones. "I see," I said quietly. "And what about me, Tommy? When do I get to see Lily and Jack?" Another pause. Longer this time. "You know you're always welcome, Ma. We've just been really busy." "Too busy for their grandmother?" "That's not fair." His voice took on that defensive edge I'd heard more and more lately. "Patricia's here because she can help during the day. You know Claire needs support right now." I offered to help Tommy. Every single week for the past 3 months, I've offered. "Yeah, but..." He stopped himself, but I heard the unspoken words as clearly as if he'd shouted them. "But you're not what Claire wants." "But what?" I pressed, needing to hear him say it. "Nothing. Look, Ma, I've got to go. Jack's calling for me. I'll talk to you soon, okay?" The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, feeling older than my 68 years. The house seemed to grow quieter around me, as if even the walls were mourning the family that used to fill them with noise and life. I tried to be understanding. I tried to remind myself that young families are busy, that new mothers need support, that I shouldn't take it personally. But how do you not take it personally when you're being systematically removed from your own family's story? I started seeing my friends less, too. How do you sit through lunch and admit that your daughter-in-law has replaced you with her own mother? How do you explain that your son, the boy you raised, the man you sacrificed everything for, has chosen his wife's comfort over your heartbreak? The shame of it was almost worse than the pain. My neighbor, Eleanor, noticed. She'd known Tommy since he was in diapers, had watched him grow up in that house on Maple Street. "Haven't seen that boy's car in your driveway lately," she mentioned one afternoon as we both tended our gardens. "He's busy," I said automatically, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. Eleanor gave me a look, the kind only a woman who's lived 75 years can give. The kind that says I know exactly what's happening and I'm sorry, and I'm angry for you. "Alice," she said gently, setting down her pruning shears, "you don't have to protect him. Not to me." Something in her voice broke the dam I'd been building for months. The tears came suddenly, unexpectedly, and once they started, they wouldn't stop. "She's erasing me, Eleanor," I whispered. "She's taken my son, my grandchildren, my place at the table. And Tommy's letting her. He's just letting her." Eleanor moved closer, her weathered hand covering mine. "Oh, honey, I know. I've watched it happen. What did I do wrong? Was I too much? Too involved? Too old-fashioned?" "You loved him," Eleanor said firmly. "That's what you did. You loved him so much that he grew up thinking the world would always accommodate him the way you did. And now he's married to a woman who's teaching him that love comes with conditions and hierarchies. She's showing him that some people matter more than others. But he's choosing her version," I said, my voice breaking. "He's choosing her mother over me." "For now," Eleanor said. "But honey, let me tell you something I learned when my own daughter-in-law tried this same game 20 years ago. You can't compete with shine and glamour and money. You can't fight manipulation with truth when someone's determined not to hear it. But you know what you can do." I looked at her, desperate for any wisdom that might ease this pain. "You can let them build their house on sand. Because that's what it is, sand. Pretty, smooth, looks solid enough. But wait for the first storm, Alice. Wait for the first real problem, the first crack in their perfect picture. That's when they'll remember who built their foundation. That's when they'll come looking for bedrock." That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't call and plead for scraps of time with my grandchildren. I wouldn't send guilt trip messages or show up uninvited or make a scene. I would simply wait. Not because I was giving up, but because I understood something Claire didn't, something Patricia's money and Tommy's blind loyalty couldn't change. Foundations don't disappear just because you build over them. They're always there, holding everything up, even when no one's looking. And when those rose bushes Claire planted in her own yard started to wither, the ones she bought from an expensive nursery and posed with for Instagram, I'd still be here, tending to mine. The ones with roots that went 3 feet deep. The ones that survived because they were planted with patience, watered with tears, and strengthened by storms. I'd be here when the prettiness faded and the real work began. I'd be here when she realized you can't buy what I built. And I'd be here when my son finally remembered where home really was. But until then, I would let karma do what I could not. Because some lessons can only be learned the hard way. And Claire's education was just beginning. 6 months passed. 6 long months of silence broken only by obligatory holiday texts and the occasional photo sent in a group message. The kind that feels more like proof of effort than actual connection. I celebrated Thanksgiving alone for the first time in 32 years. Christmas morning, I opened gifts by myself while somewhere across town, Patricia probably sat in my chair, watching my grandchildren open presents I'd sent but would never see them unwrap. I won't lie to you, my dear. Those months were dark. There were nights I questioned everything. My worth as a mother, my relevance as a grandmother, whether I'd somehow failed so spectacularly that this erasure was justified. Depression is a quiet thief. It doesn't announce itself. It just sits beside you at the kitchen table until one day you realize you can't remember the last time you laughed. But Eleanor checked on me. My church family wrapped around me. And slowly, I remembered who I was before I was Tommy's mother. I started volunteering at the community center, teaching children to bake. I joined a book club. I tended my garden with renewed purpose. I was still heartbroken, but I was learning to carry it differently, not as a burden that bent me over, but as a scar that proved I'd survived. And then, one ordinary Tuesday in March, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. "Tommy." I almost didn't answer. 7 a.m. calls are never good news, but after months of distance, Part of me wondered if he'd even notice if I didn't pick up. But mother's instinct is a powerful thing. I answered on the fourth ring. Ma. His voice cracked on that single syllable, and I knew immediately that something had shifted. Tommy? What's wrong, sweetheart? Can I? He paused, and I heard something I hadn't heard in his voice since he was a little boy crying over a broken toy. Desperation. Can I come over? I need to talk to you. Of course. Right now. I'm already in the driveway. I looked out the window. Sure enough, his car was parked on the street, engine still running, exhaust visible in the cold morning air. I hadn't even heard him pull up. Comin', baby. Doors unlocked. He looked terrible. Shadows under his eyes, rumpled clothes, hair uncombed. This wasn't the polished, put-together son I'd seen in Claire's carefully curated social media posts. This was the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, seeking comfort only a mother could provide. I didn't ask questions. I simply put the kettle on, the same copper kettle I'd used for 30 years, and waited. Some conversations require tea and time. Tommy sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. When I placed the mug in front of him, he looked up at me with eyes so full of pain and regret that my own hurt momentarily disappeared, replaced by the fierce protective instinct that never quite leaves a mother's heart. I've been so stupid, Ma, he whispered. I sat down across from him, wrapping my hands around my own mug. Tell me. And he did. Everything. It started, he said, about 2 months after Patricia moved in. At first, her presence seemed helpful. She cooked, cleaned, watched the kids while Claire worked late. But then the comments began. Your mother makes things harder than they need to be. Modern appliances exist for a reason. I don't understand why you drive across town for Alice's pot roast when we could order from that nice bistro. Those old traditions are just obligations in disguise. You're allowed to create your own family culture. Small things, Tommy said. Things that seemed reasonable in isolation. But together, they formed a narrative. I was the past, an anchor holding them back from the future Claire was building. Claire absorbed these messages like gospel. She started speaking to Tommy differently about me, not with outright cruelty, but with casual dismissiveness. Your mom wouldn't understand. Let's not bother your mother with this. She's from a different generation. Tommy, desperate to keep peace in his home, went along with it. It was easier, he admitted with shame thick in his voice, to let me go than to fight his wife and mother-in-law every single day. But then things got worse, Ma. His hands trembled around the mug. Patricia started controlling everything. How we spent money. How we raised the kids. She criticized Claire constantly, her housekeeping, her parenting, her appearance. Nothing was ever good enough. And Claire just took it because she thought that's what mothers do. That's what she thought you were like, critical and overbearing, because that's what her mother is. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I never criticized her, Tommy. I know. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. I know that now. God, Ma, I know that now. The breaking point came last week. Patricia had been living with them for 5 months, and the house that once felt like home had become a battlefield. She'd taken over their guest room, their schedule, their lives. She made decisions about the children without consulting them. She invited her own friends over for dinner parties, treating Tommy and Claire like staff. She'd even started redecorating, calling their furniture shabby and their family photos cluttered. Last Tuesday, little Lily had a fever. Claire wanted to call me. Some instinct told her she needed her mother-in-law, the woman who'd raised a healthy son, the grandmother who'd soothed countless childhood illnesses. But Patricia insisted it was nothing, that Claire was overreacting, that she was being hysterical. Modern mothers are too anxious, Patricia had said dismissively. Back in my day, we didn't rush to the doctor for every little thing. But Claire's instinct was right. By midnight, Lily's fever had spiked to 104. They rushed her to the emergency room. Bacterial infection. She needed 4 antibiotics. The doctor said if they'd waited even a few more hours, it could have been serious. Tommy's voice shook as he recounted sitting in that hospital room, watching his daughter sleep with an 4 in her tiny hand, while Patricia stood in the corner making excuses and Claire sobbed with guilt and fear. "I kept thinking," Tommy said, "about all the times you took care of me when I was sick. How you'd check my temperature every hour. How you'd sleep in the chair next to my bed. How you always knew, you just knew, when something was more than just a cold." And I realized we'd pushed away the one person who actually knew how to love us without conditions. He told me that when they got home from the hospital, he'd finally confronted Patricia. Told her she needed to leave. The argument that followed was volcanic. Patricia screaming that they were ungrateful, that she'd sacrificed months of her life, that Claire was weak and Tommy was disrespectful. Claire, exhausted and emotionally raw from nearly losing her daughter, had a moment of clarity. She saw her mother the way I'd probably seen her for years, controlling, manipulative, more interested in power than in genuine love. She'd sided with Tommy. Patricia had left that night, hurling insults and threats as she packed. "And then we sat in the quiet house," Tommy said, "and Claire looked at me and said, 'I think I owe your mother an apology.' And I realized, Ma, that I owe you more than an apology. I owe you the truth. You weren't the problem. You were never the problem. You loved us without trying to own us. You gave without expecting control. And I was too blind and too weak to see the difference." I reached across the table and took my son's hand. It was bigger than mine now, weathered from work and life, but I could still see the little boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street. "Tommy," I said gently, "I forgave you before you even asked." "How?" His voice broke. "How can you forgive me after what I let happen?" "Because that's what foundations do, sweetheart. They don't crumble when the house shakes. They hold steady and wait for everything else to settle. I'm your mother. I was your mother when you honored me, and I'm your mother now that you've remembered. That doesn't change based on circumstances." He cried then. Deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed to release months of tension and regret. I moved my chair next to his and held him the way I did when he was small, letting him purge the guilt and pain. When he finally calmed, he looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "Claire wants to see you. She wants to apologize. She wants you back in the kids' lives. If you'll have us." I thought about it for a moment, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted him to understand the weight of what he was asking. "I never left, Tommy. You all did. But my door," I gestured around the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd fed 3 generations, "my door never closed. It's been open this whole time, waiting for you to remember where home is." "Can we come for Sunday dinner?" he asked quietly. "This week? All of us?" I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt in months. "This Sunday, I'm making pot roast." "With your mashed potatoes?" "With everything, baby. With everything." He hugged me then, tight and desperate, the kind of hug that says I'm sorry and thank you and I love you all at once. After he left, I stood in my kitchen and looked around. The same worn countertops. The same old copper kettle. The same table that had held so many meals and memories. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had changed. Claire had tried to build a home on the shiny, expensive foundation her mother provided. But when the storm came, and storms always come, that foundation cracked. Because it wasn't built on love. It was built on control and conditions and Instagram-perfect illusions. My foundation? It was built on patience, on unconditional love, on showing up even when no one was watching. And when everything else fell apart, it was still there, steady and strong, waiting to hold them up again. That Sunday they came. All of them. Claire walked through my door with tears in her eyes and said words I'd never expected to hear. "I'm so sorry, Alice. I chose the wrong example. I thought love looked like perfection, but you taught me it looks like presence." We hugged. Not the obligatory, stiff hugs from before, but real, tearful embraces that spoke of new beginnings. Lily and Jack ran to me, squealing, "Grandma," like no time had passed, like I'd never been erased. I held them tight, breathing in their little kid smell, feeling their small arms around my neck. And as we sat around my old table, the one Claire had once looked at with disdain, eating pot roast and mashed potatoes, I watched my family laugh and talk and simply be together. Patricia's ghost had been exorcised. The pretense had been stripped away. And what remained was what had always been there, waiting beneath the surface. Real, imperfect, unconditional love. My dear ones, if this story touched your heart, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to Grandma Alice Stories and ring that notification bell, because every week I share tales of life, love, betrayal, and the wisdom that only comes from living long enough to see karma do its work. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever been replaced or pushed aside by family? How did you handle it? Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs today. Give this video a thumbs up if you believe that real love doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be present. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a mother feeling forgotten, a grandmother being pushed aside, or someone learning the hard way that foundations matter more than facades. And remember, my dear, you can't replace what's real. You can only forget it's there until you need it most. Life has a way of reminding us what truly matters. Sometimes gently, sometimes through storms, but always, always, the lesson comes. Until next time, keep your foundations strong and your heart open. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. This is Grandma Alice, reminding you, what goes around always comes around. And karma? She's never late. She's just getting the lesson ready. God bless you all, my dears. Now go hug someone you love.